All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm so excited that there's so many of you who are interested in learning more about the Leadership in History Awards program. I'm Bethany Hawkins, Chief of Operations with AASLH, and I have had the pleasure of working on the AASLH Awards program since I joined the staff in October of 2005. And it is still one of my favorite programs to work with. I get to see all the great work that's going on across the United States. And get to meet and work with a whole lot of fun people. So I'm just excited. Like I said, we had over 90 people register for this webinar. I don't know how many are going to be with us live, but we're just blown away by the interest in the program this year. So I hope that we will give you a little bit more information so that you'll be ready to submit some awards nominations. Sorry, I'm also working on the session proposals for our upcoming annual meeting. So everything is running together. I did a webinar yesterday about that. So, but I do have a couple of folks hanging out with me today that are going to be helping with this. We have Christy Crisp, who is our National Awards Chair. And Christine, you want to just say hi? Let them know where you're from.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Christy Crisp. I am the awards chair, but in my other life, I am the director of programs for the Georgia Historical Society in Savannah, Georgia.
And then we also have Asia Bain, who is on the AASLH staff and has worked with me very closely with awards. So Asia, you want to say hi?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Asia Bain. I'm the Program and Publications Manager at AASLH. I started working here in 2014. I was the awards intern. So it's been the biggest part of my AASLH career and also the part that I enjoy most as well, especially during the COVID times when we weren't able to travel so much. It was just such a wonderful way to vicariously experience all kinds of projects and sites around the country. And now that some travel is back in swing, it's also a good way to build your vacation bucket list by going and visiting all these great sites that maybe you had never heard of that are doing really cool projects.
All right, well, I'm going to share my screen and we will get started here. All right, so we did introductions. So we have some goals and objectives that we want out of today's webinar. First, we just want to introduce you to the Leadership in History Awards program. And if you have applied in the past or have been a volunteer in the past, we've made some changes this year. This program is always growing and changing to meet the needs of the field. So we'll be going through some of that. I'll tell you a little bit about the categories and the requirements for the awards. We want to be able to answer, why should I apply for an award from AASLH? And then how can I apply for that award? Give you some ideas for some tips for successful nomination and just overall to encourage history organizations from all states, all sizes to apply for the awards. And we will be watching the Q&A. Asia, if you can help me with that. We are recording this webinar, so we will be sending it out when we are done. We'll send out the recording. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Christy, and she's going to tell you a little bit about the purpose of the awards and the different types of awards that we give out. Christy.
All right. Thanks, Bethany. So the awards recognize creative and innovative projects from across the country. And if you've made it this far, you probably have at least some idea of that. These are awards that recognize excellence in individual achievement, in exhibits, in public programs, and there are several different types of awards, but really the goals of these awards are to highlight all of the innovative and creative work that happens all across the country. And really one of, I think, the very coolest things about the AASLH Leadership History Awards program is that it is not competitive. it has very high standards, but it's not competitive in that, very small organizations are not competing for a finite number of awards against large organizations with large staffs and large budgets. Good history is good history, and we can recognize that at all levels. And that really is, I think, what makes this awards program special. And it is what makes it so inspiring for people like me, Bethany, and Asia, who have been involved with it for a long time, and for people who have only been involved for a very short time, because as we've all seen over the last few years, even under difficult circumstances, the creativity and innovation that our organizations show has really been quite exceptional. And this awards program really allows us to see that from organizations, big and small, staffs, large and small. So just to talk very briefly about the different types of awards that are included in this program, I'm going to start at the bottom of this list just to get us going. The award of distinction is something that is very special, as you might imagine, as an award of distinction. It's given out infrequently. We don't do this every year. We do it only when the nomination really rises to the level of this award. It is given for long and distinguished individual service to the field and to AASLH. And it is something that, again, we don't give out every year. It has a slightly different award process, and those nominations are due the 1st of February instead of the 1st of March. And so again, there's information on all of these things on the website, and Bethany will talk a little bit more in a few minutes. But I wanted to start there because it is probably of all of these the award that is the most different of the ones that we're going to talk about today. Most of the awards, the majority of the awards that we give out are the awards of excellence. And these are the ones I was just talking about. They are not competitive, except for publications. And Asia will talk a little bit about that special category in just a few minutes. But the awards of excellence are given out for projects. They're given out for publications, which Asia will explain, and they are given out for individual achievement. And there are some sort of subgroups that you'll find in the guidelines for those awards of excellence, but that's the main type of award that's given out. And again, not competitive. They do have high standards, but they are not competing against each other. And then there are what we call the special awards, and the ones that you see here listed, Albert B. Corey Award and the History and Progress Awards. These awards are chosen by the review committee from among the winners of the awards of excellence. So when the review committee meets, they review and decide on the awards of excellence winners, and then they go back and look at a few that would be singled out for special recognition. The Albert B. Corey Award, which does carry a cash prize, is awarded to projects that are chosen or that are completed by primarily volunteer-led organizations. And so these are the really exceptional projects that are done on such limited budgets with limited staff, but really just rise to this next level. And that's the Corey Award. For the History and Progress Award, those are a very small percentage, again, of the awards of excellence that are chosen because they are exceptional. These are really the best of the best, exceptionally entrepreneurial, exceptionally innovative, creative, real models for the field. And so those two, the Corey Award and the History and Progress Awards, are sort of the special awards chosen from within the awards of excellence. So Bethany, does that cover basically those? Oh.
Yeah, that's great, Christy. And I forgot to mention when we started, but I'll mention it a couple of more times. Our awards committee, which we could not do this program without them, have put together a great guidelines document that is available or will be available for you to download from our website. And pretty much everything that we're going over in this webinar is available in that guidelines document. I'm actually using that as notes as I'm talking to you. So if you don't get something written down, or if we're not able to put out the PowerPoint, everything is in that guidelines document. It's a brand new revision. So I'm not sure if the brand new revision is up yet, Asia, but she's saying yes. Okay, so when you go to the awards page and look for the guidelines, you're getting all this information in one document. So Christy, you mentioned how the publication awards are a little bit different. So Asia, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk about the publication awards.
Sure. Okay. So like Bethany already mentioned, Publications Award, is still part of the Awards of Excellence program, but it goes through a little bit of a different process because publications, things that are put into books versus things that are put into exhibits or programs or multimedia things, they're just different. And so Publications Awards have a separate awards committee who only focuses on the books. So instead, well, not to say, if you're thinking of putting a book together, you can definitely talk to your state reps about that. But at the end of the day, you'll submit it to AASLH directly. And we have the categories listed on your screen here. Like Christy talked about, this is our only competitive category. There's one winner spot available in each category with the possibility of one honorable mention. But to again, keep that focus on sort of leveling the playing field for folks, we split it up into categories so that very, very big institutions, maybe institutions that have their own press. There are like state museum associate institutions that have their own press, like Minnesota and Wisconsin, are not up against people who are, self-publishing something for their local historical society. So we do divide those out a bit. I think you can check the guidelines on the website, but I think the terminology we use now is best large press and then best small press / independent author. And again, that's for someone who is not necessarily affiliated with an institution. So that's a lot of our community historian type folks would fall into that category. We also have categories for best journal article and best history practice book. History practice book would not necessarily be as much about historical content. It would be like a small museums manual or exhibit design manual or something like that that's for people working in the field. So those are the 4 categories we have available. You can see the guidelines document on the website. It has a separate form on Submittable for you to submit. The form for publications is probably the simplest of all the forms. We just ask you some basic info about the books. Does it have an ISBN? If it came from an organization, what's their budget? And then you mail us 2 hard copies in the mail. And then I distribute that to the committee so that they have a chance to see it in person, see how it looks, see how it feels. Most publication types are eligible if it has an ISBN, and it also needs to have an index or endnotes, some way that people consulting it can find your sources. Those are sort of the main requirements for publication to be eligible for our program. And yes, as Bethany has switched the slide, we have gotten some fantastic nominations throughout the years. This is one from a couple years ago, I think, and this was a small press winner, and it was this incredible coffee table book about the history of tattooing in Boston. And it was actually from a very small press that mostly just published books about tattoos and tattooing industry and things of that nature. So not necessarily a history people and not necessarily a historical press. But it was an incredible history book. We certainly enjoyed it. I think this particular press published maybe 3 or 4 books a year. So really a pretty small operation that was doing an incredible job. And I saw a question just come in the Q&A. The publication year is also important. We ask that the book be published in the previous 2 calendar years. So for this year's cycle, 2023, we're looking for books that have a publication year of 2021 and 2022. If you have a book in mind that came out this year, 2023, please hold on to it until next year. So there's enough time for it to get reviews and for it to be out there in the world a little bit. So that is a requirement as well, having that publication year within the past 2 calendar years.
AJ, we have another question for you.
Oh, okay.
For the publication awards, is the term book literal, or can it be a plan or any other sort of publication?
Ah, gotcha. I think we do take book pretty literally. We don't accept, what are some of the things that people, it's not for magazines. It's not for journals as a whole. We have that journal article category, but it must be something that is generally available to the general public. So not annual reports, not, membership magazines. It needs to be something that can be found, purchased, distributed by a public audience. I think that covers it.
Yeah, and we do have a category in our other, in the general awards for studies, which we'll talk about. So that might cover some of what you were asking about as well. And we will, if we don't get your question right now, we will have time for Q&A at the end. And Asia and Christy will be helping watch the Q&A and chat while I'm talking. So we do have an overall criteria that we look for when we're looking to evaluate our award nominations. And I probably should have mentioned earlier when I mentioned the awards committee, it is a large group of people that are working to make our awards program happen. Each state has at least one state team volunteer who would be the first level of contact for people who are putting together award nominations. And we'll talk a little bit later about how you find that. And then we have 14 regional representatives that cover all the states and work with the state captains, the state team leaders. And then they are the group that come together in Nashville or whatever city we're meeting in for that year and make the final decisions. And Christy heads up that group, so she joins that meeting as well. So there's a ton of people that are working on this program, and hopefully you'll be reaching out and talking to them. And so this is the criteria that we start with when we're looking for things. And first is it good history? And there's information in the handbook that's online, the guidebook, that tells you what we mean when we say good history. And so some of the things that we mean is that it embraces difficult topics by reflecting current scholarship, grounding the work in primary source research, and supplementing with secondary sources to provide context. It acts to build diversity and inclusiveness through interpretation that considers race, ethnicity, gender, social class, and geography, and is provocative through presenting contested history and multiple perspectives. It cultivates an experimental and creative spirit. It demonstrates the relevance of history and showcases how the public can make use of the past and discussions of the present and the future. And it attempts to be accessible to wide audiences with differing learning styles, abilities, and interest in history. And so that's sort of where we start as we're looking at evaluating nominations. And then we look at the effort put forth. So is it a stretch for the organization? That's a big deal. As Christy mentioned, these are not competitive awards except for the publications. So if we had 100 nominations that met all of our criteria and were outstanding in their own right, then we could give that many awards. So some of that is on you all to make sure that you're selling yourself. It kind of sounds weird, but in your nomination, that you're a good advocate for yourself. And we also want to be sure that we are giving awards that emulate best practices. So nominations are judged in light of prevailing thought at the time of such nominations. And so, making sure that if you have an exhibit, that it follows best practices for handling artifacts and those types of things. Another criteria is ingenuity. So special consideration is given to calculated risk-taking, new and promising or well-executed ideas, approaches, collaborations, and innovations that will serve as a model for the field. We also evaluate all nominations on their resources. So we look at what resources the nominees have at their command. And this is not sources like for your research. This is resources including funds, collections, talent of individuals, professional training and experience, or experience of an organization's staff. And again, the essential standard is not how do those resources compare with those of other nominees, but rather what has been done with these resources. And then finally, quality and professionalism. And this is where consideration is given to both what a nominee has accomplished and to how well the job has been done. And so I will just give you a little disclaimer on professionalism. That doesn't mean that it's somebody who has a PhD or a master's degree in history that is putting this together. It just means that, you know, it has the standards that should look like you did the best with the resources that you had. For example, instead of handwritten labels, you have nice printed labels, that type of thing. So I think that's important just as a note, because we do want nominations from organizations of all sizes, and we love to get volunteer-led nominations. So we've talked a little bit about the different types of awards, and we've talked about publications, but these are the other categories that we give awards in. So we have exhibits, special projects, rapid response, which I'll talk about in detail in a moment. It used to be civic engagement, public programs, multimedia, studies, and then individual achievement. So let's start off talking about exhibits. And so exhibits, we all pretty much know what exhibits are. That is usually the largest category that we get nominations in. All history organizations usually do some sort of exhibit, or maybe they do a publication if they're not doing exhibits. But this just seems to be you know, the largest category, as I said. And so there are specific criteria that we want put in with your exhibit nomination. So that includes photographs. We want photographs of all of the exhibit. We want photographs of all of the text, or a copy of all the text. And we want to know the statement, the resources consulted. So what bibliography did you use when putting together the exhibit, and evaluation information. And that doesn't have to be formal evaluation, but we want to know how there was an impact and on your target audience and people who viewed the exhibit. And we want to see a floor plan. So all this is listed out in the handbook that is on our website that you can download. This particular exhibit from President Lincoln's Cottage won one of our History in Progress awards last year. It was a tremendous exhibit in a small space. You see pretty much the entire exhibit there in that photograph, but it was specific to reflections on grief and child loss at President Lincoln's Cottage. And if you have studied President Lincoln, you know that he and his wife lost a child while he was president, and they came to the cottage and sort of used that as a place of recovery and grieving. And so they put together this great exhibit about grief and child loss, and included you know, contemporary couples. People could put names of children lost on the tree there. And it just was an overall just exceptional exhibit and way to serve their community. So this is the rapid response category, and this is what we're talking about used to be civic engagement. So this is something that is responding to the current events, current discussion that's going on in the country. An example of this was the Orlando History Center and the One Orlando Collection Initiative. And this took place after the Pulse nightclub shooting that happened in Orlando. The History Center staff really just kind of jumped in there and kind of lived with that, with survivors, with people who had lost loved ones. They created a collection specifically to tell the story of the Pulse nightclub shooting. So that is a good example of what we're looking at with rapid response. And Christy and Asia, if I go off in a tangent anywhere, you all feel free to jump in and correct me or add to the discussion there. All right, and so this is special projects. And special projects is a category, if you're doing something like an exhibit, but you have a catalog and a public program that goes along with it, you can submit that as a special project. And in that case, the committee will look at all of those components together. One thing that's important, if you are putting in a special project nomination, is that if you're including an exhibit and a public program, then you have to include all of the required materials for exhibits and public programs. So you still have to provide all the photographs. We still want to see all the text. We want to see the exhibit layout. We want to see your evaluation information. So just be sure that you're looking at all of those categories if you're thinking of putting together a special exhibit. And this was a good example of that. This was Grassmere Historic Farm at Nashville Zoo, which is in Nashville, where Asia and I live. And they did an exhibit and a ceremony, which was a type of public program with the Morton family. The Nashville Zoo is unusual. They have a historic farm right there with a historic house, outbuildings, gardens, things like that. And Tori Mason, who is their manager of the historic farm, worked together looking at primary sources that they had, making connections with descendants of people who had worked at the farm. Most of this took place after slavery was abolished. So it's sort of in that in-between time between Reconstruction and the civil rights movement. It's kind of the story that they're telling. And it's super cool. We actually got to present their award in person because they couldn't attend our award ceremony. So Asia and I went out there a month or so ago, not before Christmas, and finally gave them their award and got to see the exhibit. So this is a good example. They did the exhibit, they reached out to the family and created a connection there, and then they had a big opening ceremony that included descendants and things like that, where they had programming. So that's why they submitted into the special projects category. So this is public programs, and one thing that's really important if you're putting together a public program, we ask for a lot of the other documentation that we ask for other categories, such as your bibliography, photographs, marketing materials. But one thing that's really important with public programs is that you have evaluation. We want to see who was using this program, what the results of the program were, how many people participated. Those types of things are really important if you're putting together a public program nomination. And this is, again, a winner from last year. You can see it was a partnership nomination. So it was the humanities in Minnesota working together with the Collaborative Legal Community Coalition. So neither one of those are technically history organizations, but they worked together and brought in some historians to the humanities and did this program, public program on lynchings that took place in Duluth, Minnesota, which is usually not the #1 place you think of that taking place. So it's important that they, shed some light on that. All right, and then we have multimedia, and this category has become wider as what multimedia contends with has changed. So, it may be, this was a podcast that we gave this award to. We also will do websites, videos, and I've kind of gone blank. Asia, will you tell them about the Murder of Frank Little podcast?
I guess I can. Not just because I'm a super fan, but this podcast, just the podcast is called Death in the West, and there's a couple seasons, but season 1 was the murder of Frank Little. And so the 4 people that put it together, they're not part of any particular organization. Zach and Chad are brothers. They all live in Montana, where the story takes place. Leaf is a history professor, so it was really just sort of interest in an interesting local story that hadn't been well told. And what do you do in this day and age when you have that? You do a podcast. So I guess Leaf counts as a professional because he's a history professor. But all of them just researched this fascinating local story that happened in the early 1900s during Montana labor disputes. A lot of mining and labor unrests were happening, and Frank Little was a union organizer who was mysteriously murdered. And so it was an incredible podcast that went into the history of the settlement of Montana by Anglo-American folks, the mining industry, the growth of mining monopolies, how World War I affected how things worked out there. A lot of miners were immigrants. It was just a really, really incredible story and a really well-produced, rich podcast that was done by essentially the podcast amateurs. None of them really had did this for a living, and we just thought it was so excellent. So multimedia, I think podcasts are starting to become more and more prevalent in this category. But like Bethany mentioned, websites, online exhibits, digital initiatives, anything where the major component of it is virtual. I think in the post-2020 space, we're going to see even more entries in this category, as so many people have come to appreciate the power of the virtual in what they do.
Yeah, thanks, Asia, for helping me out there. And we have had folks contact us. We get some questions about this category, like that maybe you produced a short video that's part of your exhibit. We generally advise that you submit that as part of your exhibit and not as a standalone multimedia nomination, and definitely don't nominate both the exhibit and the video. Keep them together. And it's important with the multimedia that we receive copies of scripts and your works consulted, works cited page, so that we can, gauge, is it good history with a multimedia program. So just, be sure to share those as you're putting together your nomination. And fairly new for this year is studies. And we had that question, I think, come up earlier when we talk about publications. And what we did is we chose to break it out into its own category. So this was a good example of a study that was done by several different organizations, including development corporation, neighborhood development corporations, a consultant, 106 Group, a history organization, and the city of St. Paul. And so they did this study that then became part of the record of documenting St. Paul's African-American sites that have been lost and that are in danger of being lost. So this definitely needs to see community participation. And then we also want to know what's going to happen with the study afterwards. So we want to be sure that, it's not just going to be a study that gets, looked at once and then goes just to sit on a shelf. So we want to know how it's going to be implemented or how it's going to be used to provide resources for people who are setting laws, that kind of thing. So what's it going to do besides just be written down is important as you're thinking about studies. So one of our fun categories is individual achievement, and Miss Sears here won this award several years ago, but she's so cute. I keep putting her into the PowerPoint. But this is for people who have neared the end of their career or volunteer work that they're doing, and have really made contributions up and above what they did for their job. Now, Miss Sears is a volunteer that founded the Nahant Historical Society and kind of kept it going until she stepped down and had to retire. And I believe she was in her 90s when we gave her the award. I'm not 100% sure, but so really think what is outstanding about this up and above work. So if you have someone who is a great curator at a Cook County Historical Society, for 20 years, what have they done, kind of up and above that? And then a good example is we have a longtime member of AASLH who served on committees, who's done other things, who's been a map reviewer, always jumps in when the field wants to have ask for volunteers, really has a heart for helping other organizations. And so he was a great recipient of the Individual Achievement Award because he had been a curator most of his career, but that's not really why he got the award. He got the award for all the things he's kind of done since his career, and as part of that, just his contributions to the field as a whole. Asia, Christy, anything you want to add? Individual achievement?
Oh, I just popped a huge list into the chat there. Just to give you some examples of real folks who have won in this category before. I think sometimes we get questions about the award of excellence for individual achievement versus the award of distinction. So it helps just put some names in there. For the award of distinction, my go-to example is always Lonnie Bunch, the current secretary of the Smithsonian. But when we're talking about the award for individual achievement, it is sort of those outstanding local folks who have done such great work in their communities. And there's a couple brief examples in the chat there with notes about sort of who they are, where they were, what they did.
Great, thank you. And that's a good distinction. It's folks who do it either for your local historical society, maybe on the state level, or even like the regional level would fall under this individual achievement as opposed to the awarded distinction. So let's see. All right, so speaking of these other awards, Christy, you've already gone through these, but so I won't talk about them, but I'll just say that, these are awards that are given by the committee. You cannot apply for the HIP award. You cannot apply for the Corey award. You apply for the award of excellence, and then the committee chooses the winners of these awards out of those award of excellence winners. And there, Asia mentioned the award of distinction and Lonnie Bunch. He is one of our awarded distinction winners, and he is a good example of what we're looking for with the awarded distinction. This actually is going to, if someone nominates someone for the awarded distinction, we look at it in February. That's why we have a February 1st deadline. So if it looks like it's not in the right category, then you still have an opportunity to get them in for individual achievement. And the awards committee looks at those. We make recommendations, which then goes on to the AASLH Council, which is our board of directors, and they actually confer this award. So this even goes above the awards committee and why it is our highest award. And again, we're really looking for somebody who has made an impact on the history field on the national level. So somebody like Lonnie Bunch is a really good example of that. He has worked in regional organizations, then he helped open the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and then now he's the secretary of the Smithsonian. So that's a very good example. All right, so you've heard us talk for a while, and you may be thinking, okay, well, why should I take the time to do this? One is it brings a national spotlight to your organization. We, of course, put out all of the winners. We do a press release with the winners. We send you a press release that you can use with your local media, and that is the most press AASLH gets in a year is always around awards time. So we just love seeing that in local newspapers and things like that, so that you're getting some media out of that, some marketing. And then we also have opportunities for award winners to write blogs. They become history news articles sometimes, technical leaflets, all sorts of things. Sometimes we are looking for someone who can share a case study as part of a webinar or a session. And so we usually will go right for the awards list first when we're starting to look for those. And another thing that is good about applying for an award is that it kind of validates your staff and volunteers' efforts. And especially if you're in a small museum. I know before I joined AASLH, I worked at a historic site that had 3 full-time employees, and I was the only one with a history degree. So, you know, sometimes you feel like if you're in a small museum, you're kind of, and you get tunnel vision and you don't know how you're doing. You think you're doing good, but you don't have time to even stop and check a lot of days. And so this is just a good way to say, you know what, we are doing good work, and go to your board and your governing officials and say, look, we get this national award. And especially if you're working with volunteers or if you're an all volunteer organization, you know, that is a great feather in your cap to be recognized by a national association. And you can take that and increase your credibility with stakeholders and funders. So to be able to say that, you know, we've created this community program and we want a national award for it. Now we'd like to build on that. If you give us funding, we would like to do this. You know, it kind of gives an extra gold star to your nomination that you're putting in for your grants. And I already talked about the marketing opportunities. You know, it's a really great chance for you to, you know, get some press. All right, so how can you apply for the award? Nominations are always due March the 1st. So if you've heard us say something that has made you think maybe your project is not quite there, you need a little bit more time, you can plan on March 1st of 2024. We have nomination instructions on our website along with the handbook that has all the particulars that I've been talking about, and then some to help you through the process. Can be downloaded there on that page. And as I mentioned earlier, almost every state has a state team leader. If your state doesn't have a state team leader, you can contact your regional team leader. If you are international, I know sometimes we hear from folks in Canada and other places, you can contact Christy as our national awards chair, and she can be your contact. They are able to work with you as you're putting together that nomination. They can review sections if you want them to look at maybe your narrative, something like that. Ask them to do so. Make sure that they know you're putting in a nomination. They will start reviewing nominations on March the 1st. For that 3 weeks after that, give or take, they have the opportunity to come back to you and ask you to maybe get a different letter of critical review, which I haven't really talked about letters of critical review. So get a different letter of critical review, something like that. So just because you've submitted it on March 1st, that doesn't mean people won't come back and ask you for something, because the work of the state team leader is to review your nomination, but also to make it the best it can be before it goes on to your regional representative, who also may contact you with some questions or ask for some more information. And then the national team gets together early in May to vote on those. So I'll just caution you again to be sure to submit all required materials. And I took this picture right before the webinar because I thought it was really helpful. It's a new resource that we have that is in our guidebook. So you can look at the category that you are nominating your organization for, and then there's a nice checklist there that says everything that should be addressed in your nomination. It's a little scary when you look at it the first time. It looks like we're asking for a whole lot of information. And in some ways we are, because it is a national awards program. Chances are somebody is not going to come to your museum and be able to visit and actually review your exhibit or your public program. So we need to be sure that you're providing us the information that we need so that we are looking at all of these nominations together. So one of the big things is in section 2, and that is our critical review letters. And I did not spend time on this, and I should have, so I'm going to stop right here and talk a little bit about letters of critical review. So we ask for 2 of those for your nominations. We also ask for a CV or a resume of the person who is writing those letters. So we ask for 1 letter reviewing the scholarly merit of your nomination, and then the other one reviewing community impact. And these are not letters of support. So we don't want the letter from your mayor or from your Chamber of Commerce that talks about all the great stuff you do for your community. That's great if you want to include that in the optional materials at the end, but that is not the point of the critical review level. Excuse me, critical review letters. We want somebody who can speak to the fact that it's good history. Somebody who can speak to the fact that it's following that your exhibit follows best practices. Somebody who can speak to the fact of, okay, they've done this study, this is the impact that it had, and this is how it's going to be used in the future. Or if you're doing an education program, get a letter from a teacher who can talk about how that they were able to use that with their students, how it added to their education, those types of things. Christy, Asia, anything you all want to add about letters of critical review?
The only thing I would add is I know sometimes folks can get confused about letters of critical review versus a letter of support, and which these really aren't. I mean, these are more if you think about a book review or a review of an article or something that you've read. If you've read a review, these are sort of removed, dispassionate reviews of the project, as opposed to a letter of support that you would provide for some other nominations.
Yeah, and I know sometimes people say, well, I don't know who to ask to write the critical review. I don't live in a big city. And that's one thing another thing your state team leader can help you with. And if they don't know, they can start going up the chain to their regional and then come to us. And, we can help find somebody for that, recommend people, introduce you to people. That all that is available for you. So, be sure to ask if you're not sure. And that's another reason to start thinking about it now and not February the 27th, because you may have to send this person some stuff. They may not be able to visit either, but you can send them the same materials you're sending us and they can write that letter. So, be thinking now about who can do that for you. And so don't wait till the last minute. All right, so all award nominations are submitted online. We have Submittable, which is an online system that you'll create a username and password and be able to submit from there. I think if you have submitted before, you can still use your same username and password. Is that right, Asia? That's what I thought. And by doing that, you don't have to finish it all at one time. You can log in and start, save it, and come back. So if you need to go in and out and work on it over, several days or weeks, that is available. So as I said, we've got some great resources online. You can download this full handbook, which is only about 15 pages, something like that. So it is not very arduous to get through. Be sure to follow up with your state or regional rep. Their information, you can find their contact information through that link or on our awards website. And then you'll submit everything online. Deadline is March the 1st. All right. Already did that. And I also mentioned how they're going to be reviewed. So like I said, it starts with your state team leader, goes to your regional rep, and then we'll have our national review in May. We will notify folks of the results of that national review by early June, and then we will come out with a press release announcing the winners before the end of June. And then the awards will be presented at our annual conference, which will be September 6th through the 9th in Boise, Idaho. The awards ceremony will take place on the 8th of September there in Boise. We also will be live streaming that awards program. So if you can't attend and you get an award, you can watch the live stream, and then we'll mail you your award certificate after the conference. All right, so that is the end of the formal part of our presentation. Asia, Christy, anything else you all would like to add?
Not necessarily. The only thing I would add is if at the end, I would say, I guess after the last couple of years, if I had one piece of advice to give to nominees, I would suggest looking back and adding more about the impact of your project and evaluations that you have received. So impact and evaluations, I think, are two things that you can't have too much of, because invariably we sometimes don't get quite enough to just get, because again, like you said, since we haven't been there, we haven't seen those things ourselves. We need to hear from your community. So share those kinds of statements.
I don't have anything particularly to add, but I will note we have 3 questions in the hopper, and 2 of them are very similar, which made me realize I don't think we've said the phrase "in the past 18 months" enough in this webinar.
Yes. That's a good reminder. Thank you, Asia. The projects do have to take place within the 18 months prior to March the 1st. So I know that's a little confusing, but I believe it puts us right at October of 21. Okay. So October, they have to take place between October 21 and technically March 1st, but I would not wait for something. I would just hold off to the next year if you have anything opening in the next 6 weeks. And so past the 18 months prior to March the 1st, which is October 2021. Other questions, Asia?
We have one. And I'm really glad that you asked us this, Cindy. What if our state team leader is a colleague at the same organization?
That is a great question. So they can help you with the nomination. They can provide advice. They can't officially review it. So what we do is we'll tell them to let Asia know, and she does her magic. And so somebody who has a conflict in Illinois may end up reviewing something from California for the rep that had a conflict there. And same thing with regional reps. They cannot review them officially, but they can help you put them together. All right. Any other questions? Go ahead. We've gone right up almost, I see, till 3 o'clock Central Time, which was our stopping point. So thank you all for joining. We're really excited to have this many folks interested in the program. As we're closing, I would just say, don't be afraid to reach out to us. You can find my email, find Asia, find Christy, all there on the website. So if you have trouble with anything, please reach out to us. Asia and I are still, all of AASLH staff are mostly doing some sort of hybrid schedule. So it's easier to email us than to get us on the telephone. But if you want to set up a time for us to call you and talk about something, or if you need help finding your state team leader so that you can talk with them, we are happy to help. We have lots of experience with the awards program and really love it. So, reach out to us via email if there are questions that you have. And we look forward to seeing lots and lots of nominations. It was great to see how creative the field got over the last 2 years with dealing with all of the COVID nonsense. But now, as things are starting to open back up, we're just really excited about, what people have done now that they've had this time of creativity. Hopefully that will continue. All right. Oh, there's a question about, is there cost for each nomination? And no, you don't even have to be an AASLH member to submit a nomination. That's a good question. I should have mentioned that, but yeah, no cost, not even a membership. All right, well, thank you all. We'll go ahead and wrap this up. We will send a recording out to everybody who has signed up. And then again, you can download the guidebook guidelines there on our website, and you will have all the information that I was using throughout the webinar. So thanks, everybody.